So, I went on a work trip for 5 months and came back to find that my family had voted, without me, to let someone else live in my house. Not joking. They changed the locks, told me to stay somewhere else, and thought I'd just accept it like some homeless cousin crashing on their couch. What followed was cops, screaming relatives, ruined relationships, and the kind of family drama you usually only see in courtroom shows. If you think your relatives are bad, wait until you hear what mine did. My name's Savannah, I'm 34, and on paper, my job sounds like a dream. I work for a multinational firm that's constantly monitoring its European branches, and my role involves flying around to audit them one by one. The company foots the bill for everything: hotels, transport, meals, even laundry service. But honestly, it's not half as glamorous as people think. Most days I'm trapped in meeting rooms with no windows, buried in spreadsheets, sipping lukewarm coffee while executives explain how things are different in our office. Back home, I live in Boulder, Colorado. About 3 years ago, I bought a modest one-story house with my own money, no help from anyone. It's nothing extravagant, but it's mine. I picked the paint. I chose the curtains. I planted the tiny lemon tree in the backyard. That house became a little island of peace in my otherwise chaotic life, and leaving it empty for 5 months felt deeply unsettling. So before I left, I asked my parents to house sit. They'd just retired. My mom, Lois, was a nurse for nearly 30 years, and my dad, Frank, worked in electrical systems until he blew out his shoulder and decided he'd had enough. They're decent people overall, if not a bit dramatic, and they were more than happy to help. "Of course, sweetie," Mom said when I handed her the spare key. "We'll take great care of it. Don't you worry about a thing." My only sibling is my younger sister, Kelsey. She's 30 and just got married to a guy named Devin. He's quiet, polite, works in insurance. Totally harmless. Kelsey, on the other hand, has always been the center of attention, homecoming queen, Mom's pride and joy, the kind of person who cries gracefully and gets forgiven before she even says sorry. A few weeks into my work trip, I got a call from my mother while I was eating dinner in a hotel lobby in Prague. She opened with the usual small talk, asked about the weather, the food, whether I was making time to see the sights. Then her tone changed. "We wanted to ask something," she said, like it was no big deal. "Devin's parents, Earl and Gina? You remember them from the wedding? Well, they've just moved to Boulder, and they're looking for a home, but it's been tough finding something affordable." I already didn't like where this was going. "They were thinking," she continued, "that maybe they could stay at your place. Just for a short while, of course. Just until they find something." I paused, not because I was surprised, but because I was too annoyed to respond. Earl and Gina were perfectly polite at the wedding, but they barely spoke to me, and we had exactly nothing in common. I bought that house by working double hours, sacrificing vacations, and eating like a college freshman. Now it was being offered up like an empty Airbnb. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," I said, choosing my words carefully. "They're family now, Savannah," she replied, like that explained everything. "They don't want to stay in a hotel, and they hate the idea of wasting money on rent." I wanted to say no. I wanted to remind her it was my home, not some spare guest suite for in-laws I barely knew. But she was already doing me a favor by checking the place, and I didn't feel like picking a fight from 6 time zones away. So I gave in, but not without a condition. "Fine," I said, "but it's temporary. I want them out before I get back. No excuses." "Of course, sweetie," Mom said quickly, as if that went without saying. "They're just so grateful. You'll be their hero." Not long after, Kelsey called me to thank me personally. She sounded positively thrilled. "You have no idea how much this means to Devin's parents," she said. "They're good people, and now Mom and Dad won't feel weird about hosting them either. Just make sure they understand it's not permanent," I told her again. "They do," she promised. "Seriously, you're the best." At that point, I put it out of my mind and focused on work. I moved from city to city, country to country, Bratislava, Zagreb, Krakow, checking reports, inspecting compliance logs, giving polite feedback, then hopping on the next train. It was exhausting, but I got used to it. I stopped thinking about home altogether until my phone buzzed one afternoon in mid-April. The name on the screen made me sit up straighter. Miss Jerry. She's my 71-year-old next-door neighbor, a retired librarian who knows more about the neighborhood than Google Earth ever could. Before I left, I gave her my number and asked her to let me know if anything strange happened at the house. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Savannah, I hope I'm not bothering you, but I've noticed something I think you should be aware of." "Go ahead," I said, already bracing myself. "There have been gatherings at your house. Quite a few of them, actually. Loud music, lots of unfamiliar cars. People standing on the lawn at night, drinking and laughing. I didn't want to assume anything, but it's been happening often enough that I thought you should know." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure it's my house?" "Oh yes, dear. I even took a few videos. I can send them if you'd like." I told her yes. Less than a minute later, my inbox started pinging with files. And there it was. My house, my quiet, peaceful home, looked like a college frat rental. There were people crowding the porch, red cups scattered across the yard, cigarette butts in the flower bed, music blaring from inside, and a couple laughing loudly beside my parked mailbox like it was their front lawn. I was frozen, just watching, stunned, as strangers partied at the place I worked years to own. Earl and Gina weren't just staying there temporarily. They were hosting full-blown social nights like they'd taken over a summer rental. And my family? They knew. They absolutely had to know. The second I stopped watching the videos, I called my mom, my heart already pounding in my ears. When she picked up, I didn't bother with greetings or small talk. "Why are the neighbors telling me there are parties at my house?" I asked, my voice as calm as I could manage. There was a long pause, long enough to make me wonder if she'd hung up. But then she finally answered with a casual tone that made my blood boil. "Oh, that. It's not as dramatic as it looks, sweetie. They've just made a few friends in town and invited them over a couple times." "A couple times?" I snapped. "There are cars all over the lawn and strangers hanging out on my porch in the middle of the night. This isn't a casual dinner, Mom. This looks like a weekend bar crawl." She sighed like I was being unreasonable, like I had just complained about the wallpaper. "You're overreacting, Savannah. Everyone's just having fun. It's good for them to socialize. It's not like they're trashing the place." But that was exactly what I feared, that my house wasn't just being disrespected, but slowly destroyed while I was stuck thousands of miles away, powerless to stop it. They're not supposed to be inviting anyone over. That's not what we agreed on. This needs to stop immediately. Before she could even respond, the line went dead. She had actually hung up on me. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Tried calling her back. Straight to voicemail. Called my dad. Same thing. I sat on the hotel bed, numb for a few seconds, before calling the next person on the list, Kelsey. She picked up, sounding a little too perky for someone whose in-laws were just caught hosting illegal parties in someone else's home. "Hey, what's up?" she said like everything was fine. "I need the number for Earl and Gina. I'm going to talk to them directly." "What for?" she asked, clearly playing dumb. "They're throwing parties in my house, Kelsey." "That's what for." "Oh, come on, Savannah, don't be ridiculous. They're just getting to know people in town. You're acting like they're smashing furniture and lighting fires. It's nothing like that." "Then give me their number, and I'll ask them myself," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "No, I'm not doing that. You're blowing this way out of proportion, and if you call them, you'll just make everything worse." And then she hung up too. It was like some surreal bad dream. Everyone in my family suddenly decided I was the unreasonable one for wanting basic respect, for expecting the house I paid for not to be used like a public event space. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my hotel bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, playing every possible scenario in my head. Were people in my room? Going through my closets? Eating on my couch and spilling drinks on the rug I spent weeks saving up for? I was thousands of miles away, and my entire life was being treated like a crash pad by people I barely knew. Over the next few days, I stopped calling anyone in my family. What was the point? They had made it clear whose side they were on, and it wasn't mine. Instead, I did what I always do when I feel helpless. I poured everything into my job. I started pushing through my reports faster than ever. I skipped breaks, ate meals while typing, took early trains, late flights, and stayed up reviewing documents in hotel lobbies. I rearranged schedules, streamlined processes, and eventually convinced my boss to let me cut the trip short by 3 weeks. When I finally booked my flight home, I felt exhausted, but more than that, I felt determined. I wanted my house back. I wanted my life back. 3 days before I flew home, I sent 2 text messages. One to my mom, one to Kelsey. I kept it short, no frills, no emotion. I'm coming home in 3 days. Make sure Earl and Gina are out of my house. Both messages showed as read within minutes. Neither of them responded. Not a word. I checked my phone constantly during the long flight back, waiting for someone to say something, to tell me they were packing or had left or would be gone before I arrived. Nothing. The silence was louder than any apology. When I landed at the airport in Denver, I was dead on my feet but completely wired at the same time. I practically ran through customs, grabbed my luggage, and jumped in a cab. Every turn the driver made, every street we passed, the tension in my chest grew tighter. When the car finally pulled up to my neighborhood, I saw something that made my stomach drop. 3 unfamiliar cars parked in my driveway, one partially on the grass. The porch light was on. I could see silhouettes moving through the living room window. I paid the driver, wheeled my suitcase to the front door, and pulled out my house key. I was shaking with adrenaline, ready for whatever confrontation waited behind that door. But when I slipped the key into the lock, something didn't fit. I tried again. Then again. That's when I realized they had changed the locks. I stood there frozen, my hand still gripping the useless key. My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. After several deep breaths, I raised my fist and knocked. Hard. I could hear movement inside. Then silence. Then footsteps. The door finally opened, and there stood Gina, wearing slippers and a bathrobe, looking half asleep and wholly annoyed. "Oh," she said flatly. "You're back early." "Yes," I said, trying to control my voice, "and I'd like to know why my key doesn't work anymore." She had the audacity to shrug. "We changed the locks for safety reasons. We didn't think you'd be back so soon." "This is my house," I said slowly, carefully. "You were supposed to be out days ago." "We haven't found another place yet," she replied casually. "So you'll need to find somewhere else to stay for now. It's late. We really don't want to wake the neighbors." Then she shut the door. Right in my face. I stood there, trembling, staring at my own front door like I had become a stranger to it. I called Kelsey immediately. "Your mother-in-law just locked me out of my own house," I said the moment she picked up. Kelsey didn't even sound surprised. "Don't make a scene, Savannah. Just come to Mom and Dad's. We need to talk about this properly." I was too stunned to argue. I left my suitcase with Miss Jerry next door, who offered to keep an eye on it, then drove straight to my parents' place, dreading every second of the ride. When I walked in, I was met with a scene straight out of a horror film. Everyone was already there: Mom, Dad, Kelsey, and Devin, all sitting in the living room like they'd rehearsed this moment in advance. Nobody stood. Nobody smiled. Kelsey was the first to speak. "Sit down," she said. "We've had a family meeting. We've made a decision." I didn't sit. I just stared, waiting for the next bomb to drop. "Earl and Gina are going to stay in your house for now," she continued. The room swam for a second. I thought I'd misheard. "What do you mean they're staying?" I asked. "They were supposed to be gone before I got back." Devin finally opened his mouth. "They spent most of the money from their house sale on some other things. Travel. Gifts. Just stuff. We're going to help them save for a new place. We'll need about $85,000. $85,000? I nearly choked. "And where exactly do you think I'm going to live?" "You can rent," Kelsey said, as if it was the simplest solution in the world. "It's temporary." I looked at my parents. Waited for them to speak up, to say this was a bad idea. But they didn't. Dad nodded solemnly. "It helps the family." Mom added, "You've always been the responsible one, honey. You can handle a little discomfort." I smiled. Not because I was amused, but because something inside me snapped. I said, "Okay, I'll handle it." They relaxed. They thought I'd given up. But they had no idea what was coming next. I walked out of their house without saying another word, but inside, I was seething. My own family had sat me down like a panel of judges, voted to steal my home, and then expected me to accept it with a smile on my face. They thought I would fold, that I'd agree just to avoid the drama. They thought I'd rent an apartment like a good little daughter, while strangers lived comfortably in the house I worked half my adult life to afford. But they were wrong. I didn't drive straight back to my house. I stopped next door at Miss Jerry's first. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been waiting. "Did they let you in, dear?" she asked, her face already concerned. "They changed the locks," I said, trying not to let my voice crack from anger. "And now my entire family expects me to just walk away and let those people live in my house indefinitely." She stepped aside and waved me in without hesitation. You're staying here tonight. Don't argue. You need rest and a clear head. We'll sort it out tomorrow. She made me tea, listened to everything, and didn't interrupt once. Then she said the words I hadn't heard in weeks. You're not crazy. This is wrong. And you don't deserve any of it. That night, I stared at the ceiling in her guest room, wide awake with fury. I had 2 weeks of vacation left since I'd finished the overseas work ahead of schedule, and I knew exactly how I was going to use them. The very next morning, I was on the phone before 8, speaking to the non-emergency police line. I explained calmly and clearly that people were living in my house without permission, that they had changed the locks to prevent me from entering, and that I had documentation to prove I was the owner. 30 minutes later, 2 uniformed officers arrived at my house. I was waiting for them on the sidewalk, papers in hand. You're the homeowner? One of them asked. I handed over the deed and my ID. They were staying temporarily, but now they won't leave. They changed the locks without my consent and refused to let me in. The officers knocked on the door, and after a full minute of silence, Earl opened it just enough to poke his head out. Is there a problem? He asked, looking far less confident than he had the night before. We need to speak to everyone inside, one officer said. May we come in? Earl hesitated, then opened the door fully. They walked in, and Gina appeared a few seconds later, clutching her phone like she was about to dial back up. They tried to explain that I had invited them to stay, that I had agreed to let them live there while they got settled. But when the officers asked directly if they had changed the locks without informing me, Gina admitted it, trying to brush it off like it was for safety. The taller officer turned to me. You're within your rights to request their removal. If they don't leave today, you can file charges for unlawful occupancy. The second officer looked straight at Earl. You're not tenants. You were guests. And now you're trespassing. If we're called back here, someone's getting arrested. As they left, Gina began frantically dialing, probably calling Kelsey or my mother to rally the troops. I didn't care. I stepped into my house for the first time in nearly 5 months, and what I saw made my stomach turn. The furniture had been rearranged. My soft blue walls were painted a depressing beige. New curtains, cheap ones, hung where my old ones used to be. They had put up their own framed family photos like this was some vacation home they were settling into long-term. The rug in the living room was stained. My favorite reading lamp was gone. A smell of stale wine and something greasy lingered in the air like mold. I turned to Gina, who was now standing in the hallway watching me with folded arms and a defensive glare. You need to put everything back exactly how it was. All of it. If I find one thing missing or damaged, I'll be sending you the bill. She scoffed, but Earl spoke up before she could argue. We'll fix it. Just give us until tonight. You have until sundown, I said coldly. Then I changed the locks again. They began packing, finally, and I stayed in the room the whole time. I didn't let them out of my sight. Every drawer they opened, I watched. Every bag they zipped, I checked. I didn't trust them not to take something or accidentally walk off with my belongings. I didn't say much more, and they didn't either. But around an hour later, my front door flew open like someone had kicked it. My parents walked in first, followed by Kelsey and Devin. None of them knocked. They came in like they still believed this was a shared family space, like they had some stake in it. Savannah, what did you do? My mother yelled before she was even fully through the door. You called the police on family? Kelsey shouted from behind her. You've completely humiliated us. Devin, usually quiet, muttered something about me being heartless. My father stood back, arms folded like he was silently judging everything but refusing to say it aloud. They were illegally squatting in my house, I said without raising my voice. So yes, I absolutely called the police. They're family. Kelsey screamed. You're acting like some stranger broke in. Do you even care what this is doing to my relationship with Devin's parents? I turned to her and didn't even flinch. If you love them so much, let them stay with you. Kelsey narrowed her eyes. We don't have the space. Then you don't have the right to make decisions about my space, I said flatly. I'm not going to pay rent somewhere else just because you all decided my home was a community shelter. You're being selfish, my dad said, finally stepping forward. They need help. We all agreed on this. You've always been the one with the good job and the nice things. You can afford a little generosity. I shook my head slowly, stunned that he even said it. You had a meeting about my property. You planned to give away my home behind my back. And now you're telling me I should just accept it because I've worked harder than the rest of you. You're being cruel, Mom snapped. They're already packing. They're upset. This didn't need to get ugly. This got ugly the second you chose them over me, I said. I trusted you to watch my house. And you turned it into a party hub, handed it off to strangers, and changed the locks to keep me out. Do you even hear how insane that is? Nobody answered. They all just glared at me like I was the one ruining everything. I took out my phone, held it up, and looked straight at every one of them. You have 1 hour to get out. All of you. If you're still here when the clock hits 60 minutes, I will call the police again and press charges. For a moment, nobody moved. It felt like we were locked in a silent standoff, everyone waiting to see who would flinch first. Then, finally, Earl came downstairs, bags in hand, and gave a small, defeated nod. We're ready, he said. Good, I replied. They packed their car in silence while my family stood on the sidewalk, too stunned or too angry to speak. Before getting in the passenger seat, Gina turned and shot me one last venomous look. This isn't over, she hissed. Oh, it absolutely is, I said. My parents left without another word. Kelsey slammed her car door so hard it echoed down the street. And, just like that, they were gone. The days that followed were the quietest I'd experienced in months, and for once, that silence felt like peace. I slept in my own bed without thinking about strangers using my bathroom or throwing trash around my backyard. The cleaning crew spent a full day scrubbing every corner, steaming every carpet, and disinfecting every surface that had been touched. They found cigarette burns in my garage and glitter in the shower drain. They asked if I'd hosted a New Year's party. I didn't even know how to answer. I returned to work when my vacation ran out, and slowly, things started to feel normal again. Nobody from my family reached out. Not my mother, not my father, not even Kelsey. No surprise apologies, no awkward texts, not even a guilt-tripping voicemail. For the first time in my life, my phone was completely still. And that stillness was healing. I started going out more. I met up with friends I hadn't seen in ages. I joined a book club that met twice a month at a wine bar across town. I even went on a few dates, not serious ones, just casual dinners with people who didn't expect anything from me. And Miss Jerry, bless her heart, became the one person I could always rely on. She invited me over for coffee, brought me soup when I had a cold, and made me laugh about things that used to make me furious. I still can't believe they just expected you to be okay with it, she said one afternoon as we sat in her backyard. You'd think they were raised in a barn. I nodded and smiled, even though deep down, I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because people like my family, they never just walk away. They wait until you let your guard down, and then they come back with some new reason why you're the villain in their story. 2 months after I got my house back, the phone call finally came. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me not to ignore it. I picked up, and sure enough, it was my mother's voice, overly sweet, unnaturally calm, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. Hi, Savannah. How have you been? I'm fine, I said, not offering anything more. I knew better than to feed her the information she was really looking for. I was just thinking we could talk, she continued, and her tone dropped slightly into something more deliberate. About everything that happened. Especially with Earl and Gina. I didn't say a word. I just waited. Well, she went on, Jessica and Devin are having a really hard time. Their apartment is small, and having 2 extra people around has put a real strain on their marriage. It's been very difficult on everyone. I almost laughed. I really did. But instead, I let her keep digging. We were hoping you might consider helping them. Earl and Gina still don't have the money for a house. They made some decisions they regret, and they've been trying to get back on track. What they really need is help with a down payment. I was silent, staring out my kitchen window at the lemon tree I'd planted 3 years ago, the one Earl had nearly killed when he tried to dig a fire pit next to it. How much? I asked, knowing the answer would be ridiculous. She hesitated for only a second. Around $85,000. This time, I did laugh. Not a polite chuckle, not an amused snort, an actual laugh that came straight from my chest. You're asking me for 85 grand to fix the mess they made when they squatted in my house and trashed it? It would be a loan, she said quickly. You'd get it back eventually. With what collateral? I asked. They don't have money. They don't have jobs. They didn't even have the decency to apologize after what they did. There was a pause. Then her tone changed again, harsher this time, more familiar. Jessica is miserable, Savannah. This has been tearing the family apart. She made her choice, I said. She took their side. She helped keep me locked out of my own house. That's not something I can forget. She's your sister, my mother snapped. You're supposed to care about her. I took a breath, steady and full. You all made it clear where I stood. You had a family meeting and didn't invite me. You made a plan for my house and didn't even ask. And now that it's all fallen apart, you want to pretend like I owe you something. You're being cold. No, I said, I'm being honest. And I'm done being the only one in this family expected to give everything while getting nothing back. Before she could protest, I ended the call. Then I did what I should have done a long time ago. I opened my contacts, scrolled down the list, and began blocking them: Mom, Dad, Kelsey, Devin. I deleted old messages, cleared voicemails, and removed them from every social app one had. No more updates. No more access. If they wanted to reach me again, they'd have to knock on my door. And I knew they'd never dare do that. The following weeks were the most peaceful I could remember. I went to work, came home, cooked for myself, and never once had to worry about walking into a disaster. No calls asking for favors. No manipulation. Just clean air and the sound of my own decisions. Sometimes Miss Jerry would ask if I missed them. And I'd always give the same answer. I don't miss the people. I miss the version of them I thought they were. That's the truth. I used to believe my family was flawed but well-meaning. I thought they'd come through for me when it really counted. But when push came to shove, they showed me exactly how much I mattered, just enough to be useful. A few months later, I got a raise at work. A significant one. I celebrated by taking myself on a weekend trip to Santa Fe, staying in a quiet adobe house with a fireplace and no cell service. I hiked, read books, and didn't think about my family once. And when I came home, it was to my house, my space, my peace. But the most unexpected moment came not long after that. A letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in neat handwriting that I recognized instantly. It was from Devin. Inside was a 3-page letter. Handwritten. Confessional. He said he was sorry for not standing up to Kelsey, for going along with everything, for staying quiet when he knew what was happening was wrong. He said Earl and Gina had lied from the start. They hadn't spent their money on a temporary move or a real estate search. They had lost it in a series of failed investments and personal loans. Kelsey knew, he said. She just didn't want anyone else in the family to know how irresponsible her in-laws really were. They never planned to buy a house. Not really. He ended the letter by telling me he'd filed for divorce and was moving to Oregon. He didn't expect a response. He just wanted me to know the truth. I sat with the letter in my hands for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I didn't even consider replying. Instead, I walked to the fireplace, lit the end of the paper, and watched the whole thing burn. Some people might call that cold. But for me, that was closure. After burning Devin's letter, I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel satisfaction either. What I felt was stillness, like some noise that had been humming in the background of my life had finally gone quiet. I didn't tell anyone about the letter, not even Miss Jerry, because I knew what she'd say. She'd tell me that closure doesn't always come in the form of apologies. Sometimes, it's just truth, late and useless, but still better than silence. Another season passed. I painted the kitchen, changed out the old tiles in the hallway, and planted wildflowers along the back fence. I stopped wondering what my family was doing. I didn't check social media, didn't ask around, didn't want to know if Kelsey and my mother were still defending everything that happened. For the first time in years, my life was finally my own, untouched by someone else's expectations. Then one Sunday afternoon, just as I was getting ready to meet a friend for lunch, someone rang my doorbell. I looked through the peephole and nearly stepped back. It was Kelsey, standing there alone, holding a grocery bag like it was some kind of peace offering. I didn't want to open the door, but something in her face stopped me. She didn't look angry or smug. She looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. I opened the door, but only halfway. I didn't invite her in. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. She held out the grocery bag. "It's muffins," she said. "From that bakery you used to like." I thought maybe we could talk. "I don't want muffins," I said. "And I don't want small talk." She nodded and looked down at her shoes. "I get that. I just needed to see you." I didn't speak. I wasn't going to make this easy. "I left Devin," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't just what happened with the house. There were other things. Things I ignored. I was trying so hard to make everyone happy that I stopped being a person. I raised an eyebrow. And what exactly does that have to do with me? I'm not asking you for anything, she said quickly. I'm not here to make excuses. I just wanted to say I was wrong. I shouldn't have taken their side. I shouldn't have dismissed you. And I definitely shouldn't have helped lock you out of your own house. For the first time, I saw it, the weight of everything finally settling on her shoulders. Not guilt because she got caught. Not shame because things didn't go her way. Just honest, heavy realization. I'm not asking to come back into your life, she added. I know I might have lost that chance. But I wanted you to hear it from me, not from some letter or secondhand apology. She handed me the bag anyway, then turned around and walked down the steps, got into her car and drove off. I stood there holding the muffins, wondering if they'd taste like anything other than regret. I put the bag on the table unopened. I wasn't ready to decide what to do with it yet. 2 weeks later, I got a notice in the mail that made my jaw drop. It wasn't a letter from my family or a bill or even junk. It was an official notice from the city. Apparently, there had been a formal complaint filed against me. Someone had alleged I was running an unregistered rental property out of my home. I had 30 days to respond or risk a fine. I called the city office immediately, and they walked me through the process of clearing the complaint. I had to prove I lived at the house, show utility bills, tax records, personal ID. The clerk on the phone was polite but firm. We received a signed statement that you've been allowing guests to pay to stay on your property. I haven't, I said, furious. Not once. Someone is lying. It happens more than you'd think, she said. Usually it's a neighbor who's upset. Any idea who might want to cause trouble? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I already knew. That night, I went through everything, my voicemail, my email, even the garbage, just to make sure nothing had been slipped under the door. I was looking for any sign of who did it. But there was nothing. No fingerprints. Just a signature on a form at City Hall that they wouldn't let me see. Anonymous tip. Of course it was. I had the whole thing cleared within a week, but the idea of it, someone trying to drag me into legal trouble out of spite, was enough to keep me up for nights. And then the thought hit me like a cold slap. What if they weren't done? I upgraded my security cameras. I added another deadbolt. I changed all my passwords, checked my credit, and put fraud alerts on every card. I wasn't being paranoid, I was being realistic. People like Earl and Gina, people who think the world owes them a soft place to land, don't just disappear. They circle back when they think you've softened, when they believe enough time has passed that you'll be polite instead of prepared. Another month passed. Then 2. And finally, I got the last surprise. It came in the form of a message forwarded to me by someone at work. An anonymous email sent to my company's ethics hotline claiming I had falsified travel expenses during my trip abroad. They included specific amounts, dates, cities. Most of the details were wrong, but a few were close enough to seem suspicious if someone didn't look carefully. HR brought me in for a meeting. I brought receipts, literally. Every train ticket, hotel invoice, restaurant bill. They reviewed it all, cleared me without question, and even apologized for the inconvenience. But I knew that email hadn't come from a stranger. It had come from someone who wanted to hurt me. Someone who had nothing left but bitterness. That night, I got into my car and drove. No destination, just a slow, steady roll through empty streets while I tried to figure out how much longer I'd have to live like this, always waiting for the next move, the next betrayal, the next backhanded attack. I ended up parked at the overlook just past the city limits, staring at the lights below, wondering why I ever thought cutting off family meant they'd disappear. And then something changed. I reached into my bag and pulled out that old grocery receipt, the one still stuffed inside the muffin bag Kelsey had brought me weeks earlier. I'd never eaten them. I'd kept them wrapped in the fridge, unsure whether they were a peace offering or a setup. But on the back of the receipt, scribbled in pencil, was a line I hadn't noticed until now. I didn't tell them you called the police. They think it was Miss Jerry. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. Suddenly, everything made sense. The anonymous complaint. The fake tip to the city. The bogus ethics report. They thought Miss Jerry had turned them in, and they were trying to punish her. Not me. I went home that night, opened my laptop, and wrote a long, detailed letter. Not to my family, not to Kelsey, and definitely not to Devin. I wrote it to the city, to the department handling false reports. I provided timelines, names, and copies of every threat and text I had archived. I didn't care if charges were filed. I just wanted it on record. Because if they came for Miss Jerry again, there'd be consequences.